Hello, I'm Gordon Brewer, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, where we explore the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Hello, and welcome to the podcast. This is Gordon Brewer. Glad you've joined me. This is episode number 211 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. And if this is your first time listening in, welcome. And if you're coming back for more, glad you're with us. I hope either way you take time to follow us and subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. And also be sure and tell your friends about it. So I'm looking forward to you hearing from my guest today, Dr. Larry Waldman. And he is a forensic psychologist that has had years of experience in our field and gets to tell his story about how he built his practice and just some of the things that he's learned over the years about diversifying your income and just being able to create a private practice that is successful and really makes an impact in the community. He's had a lot of experience as an expert witness and also just has a bit of his toe in kind of the celebrity world where he has been on local TV programs and been called in to report on things just around psychology and particular different cases along the way. So it's fascinating conversation and fascinating person to listen to. So I'm looking forward to you hearing from Dr. Larry Waldman here in just a minute. But before we get to him, one of the things that I've got coming up with my friend Dr. David Hall is another free webinar on going into group practice. We've just had a lot of great response here in the past about starting a group practice and people that are curious about that. And we've got a free webinar that's going to be on January the 21st. And if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com/group, you can find out more about that particular webinar and how to register. It's going to be a live webinar, and we are going to be answering people's questions and let you find out about a course that we've got called the Group Practice Outfitter, which has just been really at least the feedback that we're getting has been very valuable to people in being able to know all the ins and outs of starting a group practice from going from solo to group. So I invite you to go over and register for the free webinar. And again, if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com/group, you can find out about that. And also, if you're not able to make it on that date, register anyway, so that way you get access to the replay. So looking forward to that coming up. And also, before I get to my conversation with Dr. Waldman, please hear this message from our sponsor of the podcast, TherapyNotes. They are who I use in my practice and absolutely couldn't survive without them. They are the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers. But here's more from TherapyNotes. You know, in running a private practice, you need to have excellent systems and processes in place. And one of the leading electronic health record systems that you need to check out is TherapyNotes. They're who I use in my practice. TherapyNotes provides a patient portal, also the ability to schedule online, send appointment reminders, also handle your collections, insurance claims. It's all in one platform for the clinical side of your practice. And they also have telehealth available through their platform. As I said, they are who I use in my practice and couldn't do without them. So be sure and check them out. Go to practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes and you'll be able to see what they have available. And also be sure and use the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. That's TherapyNotes at practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm so glad to have with me today Dr. Larry Waldman. And Larry has quite a bit of experience in private practice and just as a clinician. And so, Larry, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I'm glad you're with me as well. And also, I have to say, I really appreciate the fact that you got up so early to record with me because he's on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast, and we're recording at 10 o'clock in the morning for Eastern time. So that's pretty early on the West Coast. So thanks for taking the time to do this.
Fine. But the truth of the matter is, I'm an early riser, and I did that for my 45 plus years of practice. I got a lot of my work done in terms of reports and articles and so forth from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m.
Wow. Sounds like a great habit, actually. So that's probably very, very smart. So, Larry, as I start with everyone, why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself and your private practice journey and how you've landed where you landed?
Well, thank you. Sure. I started out as a school psychologist with the Scottsdale School District, which is a suburb of Phoenix, Arizona. From 73 to 78. And at that point, I completed the doctorate at Arizona State University and entered the world of private practice. The first year or so was a bit bumpy, but I read everything I get my hands on, talked with people and so on. And frankly, there wasn't a lot out there in the later 70s, if you will. But ultimately, I learned how to do it, and I marketed in a non-traditional kind of way, if you will, and developed a rather diverse practice where in some days, my busy days on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I saw 10 patients, and I might be doing 10 different things during those days. I also did things that, again, were kind of non-traditional and so on. And the last 20 years or so of my practice, I entered the forensic arena and spent a lot of time in court and was a sought-after expert witness in the areas of family law, personal injury, and things like that. In addition to that, did a lot of public speaking, professional speaking. I've written 7 books, including one that relates to this one, entitled "The Graduate Course You Never Had," now second edition. So my practice became probably one of the most successful in the Phoenix area.
Wow. Yeah, I love hearing that. I love hearing these stories because one of the things that I admire is that you were able to, you're really one of the pioneers in really just thinking about how we operate in private practice in terms of really thinking outside the box. In other words, going beyond just the clinical setting in terms of reaching people and being able to do all of that. And particularly with your books, that's quite impressive that you have written that many books. I'm curious, though, how did all of the ideas for this get sparked for you really during a time period when it really wasn't that prevalent?
Well, I would sit and think about things a lot. And I also coach, by the way, young clinicians in how to develop and market their private practice. And I always talk about being open to the possibilities. If you want, I can give you an example of
Yes, love examples and stories. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. This was probably 8 years ago or so, a couple of years before I retired. But I read an article in the newspaper about a case where a surrogate gave birth to the child and then refused to return it to the genetic parents. And the article noted that there really wasn't any law in this instance. The genetics had outpaced the legal part, if you. And so they were stymied as to what was going on. And then the article noted that there were a couple of attorneys that specialized in this arena. And one of them, in fact, where this case actually occurred, was in Tucson, Arizona, which is an hour and a half south of Phoenix. And I read that article and I went, So I looked this attorney in Tucson up, called her, and in fact, her secretary, let me in, and I was speaking to her, and I said, I read this article about this case that you had, and it occurs to me that to prevent something like this from happening again, that it would be a good idea that the next time you have a surrogate, that before she goes and does her business, if you will, that she undergo a comprehensive psychological evaluation to ensure that she's competent and sane and is ready to go with the program. Mm-hmm. And she said, "Wow, that is a great idea." And from that point forward, I probably did, a dozen comprehensive psychological evaluations at a very high rate, by the way, because thousands of dollars are at risk. So that's what I mean by, being open to the opportunities. And I could tell you other stories, but I won't bore you. Yes. But I did that on numerous occasions where, I'm sure many of my colleagues read the same thing, but went, "Oh, that's interesting," and put it down and walked away, where I followed up, and that led to very interesting, very lucrative opportunities. Right. Yeah, what I love about that is just kind of the, maybe it's a little bit of courage to kind of step out in that way. Is that, or was it just more just intrigue? It's kind of like, I know how to fix this. And so you go and just put yourself out there. Is that kind of what the process was like for you? Pretty much, yes. Well, again, as a professional speaker, so on, I'm accustomed to speaking in front of large groups of people. And as I often say to patients, what's the worst thing that could happen? So, yes. Now, I'm not going to tell you that every time I struck out to try to do something like that, it was always successful. No. In fact, my wife used to refer to it as throwing mud up against the wall, and we have Mount Kilimanjaro at the bottom of that wall because a lot of that mud did not stick. So persistence is a significant part of practice marketing. Right. But when I was active in practice, and I'm still active now in terms of speaking and writing and consulting, but I'm not actively seeing patients any longer. But when I was active in practice, I made a point of every day doing something to promote my practice, whether it was a phone call, a podcast, an email, something of that nature. And sometimes, 3 or 4 over the course of a year, you now have several hundred pieces of mud, if you will, up on that wall, and something is going to stick. And
Yes.
that's what happened with me. I got into a lot of interesting, lucrative situations.
Right. Right. Well, I think what it speaks to is that I think my listeners hear from me all the time the importance of being persistent and consistent with things. And I think what that speaks to is you just constantly put it out there. And it's kind of like going fishing. You just keep putting bait in the water, and eventually you're going to catch something. Yeah, but you have to go. You have to show up every day. Yeah,
I love that analogy. I have never thought of that, but you're right. Yeah, the more casts you make, the more chances you have for a bite.
Right. Exactly. So after several years of being in private practice, how have you seen what we do in terms of private practice? How have you seen it changed? It seems like, at least now, there are a lot of us that are kind of coaching people in private practice, and a lot of us that are doing that. But what are the trends that you've noticed over the years in terms of people going into private practice?
I think the most significant and newer trend that I've noticed is, of course, the internet.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of young clinicians are finding value in marketing on the net. Again, I obviously started well before that time. I'm clearly a senior, if you will. So I'm not as familiar with that, although I certainly do some of that. But I'm more old school, and I still coach that because I still think it's best. For me, it was a simple formula, and that is, I would ask myself, what kind of client do I want to see, and so forth. And then many times, or then often, I'd ask, well, okay, if I can't get to the client directly, although sometimes I did, because often I was on local TV and local radio and so on. I mean, I was on Channel 3 News in Phoenix, probably in my career 24 times at least. Talk radio, KTAR talk radio, the main talk radio station there. In fact, the Pat McMahon, that was the morning drive time. We became friends, and he called me, his doc, and so on. I probably spoke to him at least 30 times and so on. So I could get to people directly that way. But the other way is, if I would think to myself, now, who could refer me these kinds of people and so forth? Mm-hmm. And then what I would do, and so on, is get to them and speak in front of them. I'm a firm believer that if you can get in front of a group of potential referral sources and speak knowledgeably to them, that's the best marketing in the world. Mm-hmm. Because now they view you as an expert, mm-hmm. and then they're going to refer to you.
Right.
A quick example again. Back in the 90s, I ran into a personal injury case, kind of fell into my lap. And when I was done with the case, everyone was happy. The client was happy. The client's father, who actually referred her, was happy. The chiropractor was happy because he saw her make significant growth after she began seeing me. And the attorney was exceptionally happy because now he was getting 40% of a much bigger piece of the pie. Mm-hmm. Because now with my reports and so forth, I showed the insurance company that this was not only a matter of fixing the car and fixing her back and paying her for lost time from work and all those things that typically PI attorneys do, but there was the social emotional piece.
Mm-hmm.
And when that case was over, I went again, well, within 6 months, I spoke to the Arizona Bar Association personal injury subsection on recognizing and managing post-traumatic stress disorder in the PI client. And that part of my practice absolutely took off.
Right.
But I didn't end there, because I also went and spoke at the Arizona Chiropractic Association annual convention on the same topic. So
Wow.
I'm now getting referrals from PI attorneys and chiropractors for personal injury clients.
Wow. Yeah, I've always think of marketing in private practice as really it's more about helping people find you, and then knowing how you can help once they find you. Like you said earlier, the internet has changed a lot of that. It's it's funny. Just yesterday, somebody locally here in my town in Kingsport, Tennessee, had reached out to me to be an expert on a blog article they were writing, and for the city of Kingsport here. And it was just kind of out of the blue. But again, I think it was because we've done a good job of just kind of getting our name out there and just kind of being, you just say, here I am, and this is what I do. And then that pays off, rather than just hoping that people will find you. It's a very active kind of thing of just getting out there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As I say all the time, private practice is a business.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I speak across the country to mental health associations on how to develop, manage, and market their practice. And I often start off by saying, raise your hand if you consider yourself a business person. And more often than not, only a handful of people will actually do that.
Right.
And I say, and then I say to the rest, I said, those of you who haven't raised your hand, good luck. Because like it or not, the practice of therapy is a business.
Mm-hmm.
And like any business, you have to understand how to manage it effectively and market it. I like to say you could be the best clinician in the county, but if only you and your mom know that, you're not going to be successful.
Right. People
have to know who you are, where you are, and what you do.
Right. Well, Larry, with your book, the graduate course you never got, I think I'm saying the title right.
Yes, that's
yeah. So besides marketing, what else do you cover in that book?
Well, I talk about income. That in addition to, of course, marketing yourself effectively, which I think is the key to a private practice. We do noble work. I say this all the time. We save marriages. We save people from suicide. We help parents with their children and so on. We deserve to be compensated appropriatly for that and so on. And so one of the things that I did in my practice was to develop, again, passive streams of income. And that is earning income when I'm not necessarily sitting in front or across from another client. And one of those ways, and we've already talked about, is writing books. I'm My first book that I wrote in 1984 is entitled Who's Raising Whom? And that book is still selling. It's still appropriate and so on. Now, yes, it took a lot of time and effort to write a book, but once you're done, it's done. And then again, if you market it well enough, you reap the rewards. I probably have sold 20,000 copies of that book. So writing books is a way to, again, get your name out, but also earn passive income. Professional speaking. I've made a lot of money speaking professionally, and typically it's on weekends and after hours and so forth, so it really doesn't interfere with practice too much, and yet I'm getting additional income selling books, and of course it's a great marketing tool. The other thing that I did is I purchased my own building. And I had 9 renters in my building. So I made money, not off their work, but just their rent. And I talk about that in my book. I stayed out of their pockets, as I like to call it. But I made money based on the rent that these providers paid me and so on. And we all cross-referred and so on. So even when I wasn't at work, I was earning income.
Right.
So that's, I think, also important, and so on. And then I used some of that money appropriately with other real estate investments, and so here I am.
Yes.
Comfortably retired, if you will.
Yes. Yeah, I think that message is so important, in that just the importance of diversifying income, and I love the concept of having passive income. There's a podcast that I listen to, and you might be familiar with him. His name is Pat Flynn, and he has a podcast called Smart Passive Income, and he really kind of dives in deep to this whole concept of creating businesses that you do a lot of work on the front end, but once it's set up, it brings in a steady income stream for you. And that's been, I know, part of what I'm doing in my own practice is creating other ways to create income, either through my group practice and that sort of thing. And you're exactly right. Owning real estate and other things outside necessarily the clinical realm are great ways to really just make sure that you're getting the income that you need and deserve in your practices. Yeah. So
yes, and I say this in my workshops. Unfortunately, the majority of clinicians out there are trading time for money. That's it. They is when they're seated in one chair and the client is seated in the chair opposite them. That's it. Okay, that can work, and you can make a decent living doing that, particularly if you're charging cash pay prices and so on. But still, if you're trading time for money, there's only so much time that you can work. And the truth of the matter is that people who become wealthy, of course, are outside of that. So you have to monetize your time. Now, you mentioned group work. Now, I didn't do much of that, although I did have was a parenting group and so on. But I knew of some in fact, there was one clinician who only did group work, and when you can see a dozen people at one for 90 minutes. Paying you a decent fee to do that, that certainly beats the $65 that managed care is going to give you for that hour ways.
Right.
I recently saw someone who does retreats and so on, and where people come for a weekend and stay in a local weekend, and there's a penny for that. Those are interesting ideas.
Right.
Where you can,
right.
Again,
yeah.
monetize your.
Yeah. What you're speaking to is really going from the concept of a one-to-one kind of relationship with clients to a one-to-many. And that is, you're exactly right. That is where really where you can, to use the term, parlay your time in a way that is going to be a little more lucrative in the long run. So, well, Larry, I want to be respectful of your time, and I've really thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. Tell folks how they can get in touch with you and find out more about you.
Yes, my website is Top Phoenix, like the city, psychologist.com. On that site, I list about a couple of dozen of my articles. I list my books that are available there, and of course on Amazon, and through me as well. My email address is Larry Waldman, PhD @cox.net. And I'll give you my phone number as well, which is 602-418-8161. And yes, I do individual coaching with clinicians to help them jumpstart their practice.
Awesome. And we'll have links to all of this in our show summary and show notes for people to access it easily. So, well, Dr. Larry Waldman, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening in on my conversation with Dr. Larry Waldman, and apologize for the sound quality on some of that. We were having trouble with our internet connection, but felt like it was good enough to still get the content out there. And speaking of audio quality, you might notice that on the intro and outro of this episode, it sounds a little different. I finally got a new microphone that I'm kind of geeking out about. But if you're interested in any of that, you can email me. But anyway, glad you joined me for this episode. And be sure and check out Dr. Larry Waldman's website, topphoenixtherapist.com. And there'll be links in here in the show notes and show summary, so you can find out more about him and his work and his books and that sort of thing. He's got some great books. So be sure and check that out. And also, love to have you for the free webinar that's coming up on the 21st of January. And you can find out more about that by going to practiceoftherapy.com/group, and you can register for the free webinar. And even if you're not able to attend that day, be sure and register so you can get the replay. And as always, be sure and check out our sponsor, TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. And also you can find out more about them at practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. And be sure and use the coupon code or the promo code, just Gordon, Gordon. And that way you can get 2 months of their services for free. So looking forward to you joining me for the next episodes. Got some great guests lined up, and really looking forward to this new year and all the new stuff. So take care, folks, and hope you have a great rest of your day or rest of your week. And we'll talk to you again next week. You have been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the PsychCraft network of podcasts. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free Private Practice Startup Guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.